I'm sitting in a kitchen full of food that nobody came to eat. 11 people confirmed they'd be here tonight, and one by one, they all sent cancellation texts until I realized the horrible truth. I was completely alone, surrounded by homemade appetizers and decorations, facing the most humiliating night of my life. My name is Charlotte, I'm 27 years old, and I've always been the kind of person who struggles with making friends. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to prove that I finally belonged somewhere, that I had people who cared about me. Instead, I'm learning just how wrong I was about everything. 2 months ago, I decided to throw what I hoped would be the perfect dinner party. It wasn't for any special occasion, just a chance to bring together the people I'd been slowly getting to know over the past year since moving to Austin. There was Dylan from my book club, who always seemed genuinely interested when we discussed novels. He was this thoughtful guy in his early 30s who worked as a graphic designer and had this way of asking questions that made you feel like your opinions really mattered. We'd talked after book club meetings about everything from our favorite authors to our childhood dreams, and he always remembered little details from our previous conversations. He had this habit of tilting his head slightly when he was really listening, and his eyes would light up when he discovered something we had in common. I thought we had a real connection, something that went beyond just being book club acquaintances. Then there was Mia and her boyfriend Tyler from the apartment complex. Mia was bubbly and outgoing, the kind of person who made everyone around her feel welcome. She worked as a nurse at the children's hospital and had this infectious laugh that could brighten any room. She was always carrying homemade snacks to share with neighbors, always asking how your day was and actually listening to the answer. Tyler was quieter but sweet, an accountant who loved craft beer and vintage vinyl records. He had this gentle way of speaking and would always offer to help with anything you needed. They'd invited me to their game night last fall, and I'd felt like I was finally part of a couple's social circle for the first time in years. We'd spent hours playing board games, sharing stories, and I'd left their apartment feeling like I'd found my people. Brooke from work was someone I'd really connected with over our lunch breaks. She was a marketing coordinator in the department next to mine, and we'd bonded over being transplants from small towns trying to make it in a bigger city. She had this dry sense of humor that perfectly matched mine, and our conversations often stretched well beyond our allocated lunch hour. We'd talked about our career goals, our dating disasters, our families back home, and I genuinely felt like we were becoming real friends. She would save funny memes to show me, remember things I'd mentioned weeks before, and always made time to chat when she saw me in the hallway. I thought our friendship was growing into something meaningful and lasting. My neighbor Nathan lived 2 doors down and had been a lifesaver when I first moved in. He helped me carry my heavy furniture up 3 flights of stairs without me even having to ask, and ever since then, we'd developed this easy friendship. He was a software engineer who worked from home, and we'd often run into each other getting mail or doing laundry. Our conversations started casual but had gradually become deeper as we talked about our struggles with dating, our career frustrations, and our shared love of hiking. He was the kind of person who would text to check if I needed anything when a big storm was coming, or offer to pick up groceries for me when he was heading to the store. I valued having a friend so close by, someone I could rely on. Zoe and her husband Ryan I met through a weekend pottery class I'd impulsively signed up for back in February. Zoe was an elementary school teacher with paint-stained fingers and this wonderful way of finding beauty in everything around her. She would get excited about the smallest details in our ceramic creations, celebrating everyone's progress with genuine enthusiasm. Ryan was a paramedic who had the most fascinating stories from his job, but he told them with such compassion and humanity that you could see how much he cared about helping people. They'd been married for 3 years and had this comfortable dynamic that made me feel hopeful about finding that kind of partnership someday. We'd started hanging out outside of class, grabbing coffee after our pottery sessions and talking about everything from art to life philosophy. They made me feel included in their world, and I thought I was becoming a genuine friend to both of them. And then there was Ashley, Olivia, and Hunter from my hiking group. I'd joined the group 6 months ago, desperately trying to find an activity that would help me meet like-minded people. Ashley was a personal trainer with boundless energy who always pushed the group to try more challenging trails. She had this way of making everyone feel capable and strong, cheering people on when the path got difficult. Olivia worked in environmental science and could identify every plant and bird we encountered on our hikes. She would share fascinating facts about the ecosystem we were walking through, making every trail feel like an adventure. Hunter was a freelance photographer who often brought his camera along and would take the most beautiful pictures of our group adventures. He had this quiet artistic soul and would often hang back to capture the perfect shot of a sunset or an interesting rock formation. Over the months, we developed this easy camaraderie, sharing water bottles, helping each other over difficult terrain, and having long conversations during our post-hike meals. I thought I'd finally found a group where I belonged. These weren't just random acquaintances I was trying to impress. These were people I genuinely cared about, people I thought cared about me too. Over the past year, I'd slowly opened up to each of them in ways I rarely did with anyone. I'd shared stories about my childhood in a small town in Ohio, where I'd always felt like an outsider. I'd talked about my fears about starting over in a new city at 26, leaving behind the few connections I had back home. I'd shared my dreams of maybe starting my own consulting business someday, something I'd never told anyone else because it felt too vulnerable. I thought we'd build something real, something that went beyond surface-level pleasantries. The idea for the dinner party came to me during a particularly lonely weekend in early September. I was sitting in my apartment, scrolling through social media and seeing all these photos of friends gathered around tables, laughing and enjoying each other's company. There was this one post from a college acquaintance showing her kitchen full of people cooking together, everyone looking so comfortable and happy in each other's presence. I wanted that so badly it physically hurt. I wanted to be the kind of person who had a house full of friends, who could throw a party and know people would show up excited to be there. I'd been thinking about it for weeks, actually. Every time I had individual conversations with these people, I'd think about how much I'd love to introduce them to each other, to create this wonderful evening where all my favorite people could meet and maybe become friends with each other too. I imagined Dylan and Hunter bonding over their shared interest in visual arts, or Mia and Ashley comparing stories about their demanding but rewarding careers helping others. I pictured Olivia and Zoe discussing education and environmental issues, or Tyler and Nathan finding common ground in their quieter personalities. I wanted to be the connector, the person who brought together this amazing group of individuals. So I started planning with the kind of intensity that probably should have been a warning sign. I spent hours researching recipes, creating a menu that would accommodate everyone's dietary restrictions and preferences. I knew Dylan was vegetarian and had mentioned loving Mediterranean flavors during one of our book discussions about a novel set in Greece. Mia couldn't eat gluten, which I'd learned when we'd gone out for pizza and she'd had to special order a gluten-free crust. Tyler was trying to avoid dairy as part of a health kick he'd started, something he'd mentioned during game night. Ashley was always talking about eating clean and organic foods, constantly sharing articles about nutrition on social media. Olivia had mentioned being pescatarian during one of our hiking trips, explaining how her environmental work had influenced her eating choices. I wanted everyone to feel welcome, to feel like I'd really thought about them individually and cared about their comfort and happiness. I spent an entire weekend researching and testing recipes, turning my kitchen into a culinary laboratory. I made 3 different versions of a butternut squash soup until I found one that was creamy enough without using any dairy, perfect for Tyler's restrictions. The first attempt was too watery, the second too thick, but the third had this perfect velvety consistency that I knew would impress everyone. I practiced making gluten-free bread from scratch, which was much more challenging than I'd anticipated. Regular bread recipes don't translate directly to gluten-free versions, and I had to learn about different flour combinations and binding agents. The first loaf was dense as a brick, the second crumbled apart when I tried to slice it, but by the third attempt, I had created something that was actually delicious. I researched wine pairings extensively, reading articles about which wines complement autumn vegetables and consulting with the staff at 3 different wine shops. I picked out a crisp Sauvignon Blanc that would pair well with the appetizers, a medium-bodied Pinot Noir that would complement the roasted vegetables, and a dessert wine that would be perfect with the chocolate tart I was planning. Each bottle was chosen with careful consideration of the meal and the diverse tastes of my guests. The planning became almost an obsession that consumed my free time for weeks. I created detailed shopping lists, organized by store and by preparation timeline. I mapped out which dishes could be prepared in advance and which needed to be made fresh. I researched table settings and bought cloth napkins in a warm autumn color that would complement the seasonal menu. I spent hours at the home goods store, comparing different plates and bowls until I found the perfect set that would create the elegant but welcoming atmosphere I was envisioning. I even created a playlist with carefully selected songs that would provide the perfect background ambience without being too distracting for conversation. I spent an entire evening curating music that would flow naturally from cocktail hour through dinner and into the later evening, choosing artists that I thought would appeal to the diverse musical tastes of my guests. Hunter had mentioned loving indie folk music, Tyler was into classic rock, and Mia always had pop songs stuck in her head, so I tried to create a blend that would make everyone feel comfortable. I picked October 15th, a Saturday evening, figuring that would work best for everyone's schedules. I'd been observing my potential guests for weeks, noting when they seemed to have free time and when they mentioned being busy. Most of them seemed to have fewer commitments on Saturday evenings, and I wanted to give people enough time to relax and enjoy themselves without worrying about work the next day. The invitations went out 3 weeks in advance, and I treated them like an art project. I didn't just send a casual text like, "Hey, want to come over for dinner sometime?" I went to a craft store and found this beautiful cardstock in a warm cream color that felt elegant but not pretentious. Each invitation was handwritten in my best penmanship, with details about the date, time, and address, plus a personalized note for each person about how much I was looking forward to seeing them. "Dylan," I wrote, "I'm so excited to finally get everyone together in one place. I think you'd really enjoy meeting some of my other friends, especially Hunter. You both have such interesting perspectives on art and creativity. Looking forward to discussing books and life over good food." To Mia and Tyler, I wrote, "I've been wanting to introduce you to some of my other friends for months now. I think you'd all get along so well, and it'll be such a fun evening getting to know each other better. Can't wait to cook for you both." For Brooke, I mentioned how much I valued our friendship and how excited I was to share that with other people I cared about. "Brooke, this dinner party has been a dream of mine for so long, and I can't imagine having it without you there. You're going to love meeting everyone, and I know they'll love you too." To Nathan, I wrote about how glad I was that we'd become friends. "Nathan, thank you for being such a wonderful neighbor and friend. I'm so excited for you to meet the other important people in my life. This is going to be such a special evening." Each invitation took me nearly 20 minutes to write because I wanted every word to be perfect, every sentiment to be genuine and personal. The responses were everything I'd hoped for and more. Dylan texted back within an hour of receiving his invitation, "Charlotte, this sounds absolutely amazing. I love dinner parties and I haven't been to a good one in ages. Should I bring anything? Wine? Flowers? I'm genuinely excited about this. It's exactly the kind of evening I've been craving. Thank you for including me." That message made me smile for the rest of the day. Someone was genuinely excited about spending an evening at my apartment, eating food I'd prepared, meeting people I cared about. Mia responded with multiple exclamation points and heart emojis. "Yes, yes, yes. Tyler and I have been wanting to meet your other friends for so long. This is going to be such a blast. I can already tell this is going to be one of those perfect evenings that we'll remember forever. Can't wait to see what you cook up. I know it's going to be incredible because everything you do is thoughtful and amazing." Tyler added his own message a few hours later. "Mia showed me the invitation and I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks for thinking of my dietary restrictions, that means more than you know. It's rare to find someone who pays attention to details like that. This is going to be great." Even Nathan, who I wasn't completely sure would be interested since we'd never socialized beyond casual hallway conversations, seemed genuinely excited. "Count me in, neighbor. Haven't been to a good dinner party in ages, and I'd love to meet some of your friends. This is really thoughtful of you to organize. It takes a special person to bring people together like this." His enthusiasm surprised me in the best possible way. Maybe our friendship was deeper than I'd realized. Brooke's response was exactly what I'd hoped for. "Charlotte, this is such a sweet idea. I've been wanting to meet the other people in your life, and a dinner party sounds absolutely perfect. You're such a good friend for putting this together. I can't wait to see your apartment all decorated and meet everyone you've been telling me about." Ashley from the hiking group responded with her typical boundless energy. "This sounds epic. I love meeting new people and I'm always down for good food. Plus it'll be fun to hang out with you outside of the trail context and see your domestic goddess side in action. I'm already excited." Olivia added her own thoughtful response about how much she was looking forward to seeing my apartment and meeting people from different parts of my life. "What a lovely idea, Charlotte. I've always believed that the best evenings happen when you bring together people who might not have met otherwise. I'm honored to be included and can't wait to meet everyone." Hunter said he'd love to take some photos of the evening if that was okay with me, which felt like such a sweet offer. "This sounds wonderful, and if you don't mind, I'd love to bring my camera and capture some moments from the evening. There's something magical about documenting friendships and good food coming together." Zoe and Ryan responded as a couple with equal enthusiasm. "We're so excited. Ryan's been talking about wanting to meet more of your friends, and I can't wait to see what kind of amazing meal you put together. This is exactly the kind of evening we love: good people, good food, good conversation." One by one, they all confirmed. All 11 of them. I felt this warm glow spreading through my chest as each yes came in, a feeling of anticipation and belonging that I hadn't experienced in years. Finally, I thought. Finally, I was going to have that moment I'd been craving for so long, surrounded by people who wanted to spend time with me, who were excited about an evening I'd planned. I printed out their responses and kept them in a little folder, reading through them whenever I felt anxious about the party or started second-guessing whether people would actually show up. These weren't just polite acceptances. These were enthusiastic confirmations from people who seemed genuinely excited about the evening, people who were looking forward to meeting each other through me. I threw myself into the preparations with an intensity that consumed my thoughts and free time for the next 3 weeks. I cleaned my apartment until it sparkled, going over every surface multiple times with different cleaning products. I scrubbed the bathroom until the fixtures gleamed, organized my bookshelves so they looked intentional and welcoming, and even cleaned the windows so the natural light would be perfect during the cocktail hour. I rearranged furniture to create the perfect flow for mingling, spending an entire Saturday afternoon moving pieces around until I found the ideal configuration. I moved my coffee table to create more space in the living room and borrowed extra chairs from neighbors so everyone would have a comfortable place to sit. I created a separate conversation area near the windows where people could chat while I finished preparing the meal. I bought new dishes because I wanted everything to look just right. Not expensive china or anything fancy, but a matching set of plates and bowls that would look cohesive and intentional rather than the mismatched collection of dishes I'd accumulated over the years. I found these beautiful autumn-colored plates at a home goods store that perfectly matched the warm, cozy atmosphere I was trying to create. The salesperson even commented on what a lovely choice they were for entertaining. I spent entire weekends testing recipes, making sure every dish would be perfect. The butternut squash soup took me 4 attempts to get the seasoning just right. I wanted it to be flavorful enough to stand on its own but not so intense that it would overwhelm the other dishes. I experimented with different spice combinations, trying various amounts of ginger, nutmeg, and sage until I achieved the perfect balance of warmth and complexity. The gluten-free bread was even more challenging than I'd anticipated. Regular bread recipes don't translate directly to gluten-free versions, and I had to learn about different flour combinations, xanthan gum, and binding agents. The first batch came out dense and heavy, like a brick with the texture of wet sand. The second was too crumbly and fell apart when I tried to slice it. But the third attempt was perfect, light, flavorful, and with just the right texture that you'd never guess it was gluten-free. The menu I settled on was ambitious but achievable, designed to show care for each person's preferences while still creating a cohesive, restaurant-quality meal. I planned to start with appetizers in the living room, a spinach and artichoke dip that could be made dairy-free using cashew cream, stuffed mushrooms with herbs and toasted nuts instead of cheese, and a beautiful cheese board for those who could eat dairy, featuring Tyler's favorite aged cheddar and brie that I'd noted during our previous conversations. For the main meal, I'd prepared butternut squash soup with homemade bread, a huge salad with roasted vegetables and 3 different dressing options to accommodate everyone's tastes. There was gluten-free pasta primavera specifically for Mia, with fresh vegetables sautéed in olive oil and herbs. Stuffed portobello mushrooms for Dylan and Olivia, filled with quinoa, vegetables, and fresh herbs. Herb-roasted chicken for the meat eaters, marinated for 24 hours in a blend of rosemary, thyme, and garlic. And roasted salmon for those who ate fish but not meat, seasoned with dill and lemon. For dessert, I'd made a chocolate tart that took me 3 attempts to get right. The first one had a soggy crust that collapsed when I tried to slice it. The second was too bitter, the chocolate overwhelming rather than decadent. But the third was perfect, rich and luxurious but not overwhelming, with a crisp pastry crust and silky filling that I was genuinely proud of. I'd also made a fresh fruit salad with seasonal ingredients for anyone who wanted something lighter after such a substantial meal. The week leading up to the party, I sent gentle reminder texts to everyone, but they weren't just functional reminders. Each one was personalized and showed my growing excitement about seeing them. Dylan, looking forward to seeing you Saturday. Still planning on 6 o'clock? I can't wait for you to try the butternut squash soup. I think you're really going to love the flavor combination I came up with. To Mia and Tyler, getting so excited for Saturday. I picked up some of that gluten-free pasta you mentioned loving, Mia, and I think Tyler's going to really enjoy meeting Hunter. They both have such interesting perspectives on creativity and making art from everyday moments. Most of them responded positively and with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. Wouldn't miss it. The soup sounds incredible. I'm already imagining how amazing your apartment is going to smell, from Ashley. See you then. Can't wait to meet everyone and finally see your famous cooking skills in action, from Zoe. Looking forward to it, neighbor. Thanks again for including me in this, from Nathan. A few didn't respond at all, but I figured they were just busy with work or other commitments. People don't always respond to reminder texts, right? Their original confirmations had been so enthusiastic and detailed that I didn't worry about the silence. I assumed they were as excited as I was and just didn't feel the need to confirm again. I even went shopping for wine on Friday evening, making a special trip to the upscale wine shop across town where the staff really knew their products. I explained what I was serving and the kind of atmosphere I was trying to create, and they helped me select 3 different bottles that would pair beautifully with the meal and accommodate different preferences. The sommelier even gave me tips on which order to serve them and what temperature would be ideal. I picked up fresh flowers for the table on Saturday morning, choosing a beautiful autumn arrangement with deep oranges, burgundy, and golden yellows that would complement the seasonal menu and the warm lighting I'd planned. I arranged them in 3 smaller bouquets so they wouldn't block conversation across the table, placing them strategically to add color and life to the space without being overwhelming. Saturday morning, I woke up before my alarm with this fizzy excitement in my stomach that I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't nervous energy, this was pure anticipation and joy. This was it. This was going to be the night that changed everything for me socially. I was going to prove to myself that I could be the kind of person who had a living room full of friends, who could throw a successful party, who belonged somewhere in this city I'd been trying to make home for over a year. I started cooking at 8 in the morning, beginning with the bread since it needed time to rise properly. The yeast bloomed beautifully in the warm water, and I knew it was going to be a good batch. Then I moved on to the soup, slowly sautéing the onions until they were perfectly caramelized and roasting the squash until the edges were golden brown and the flesh was tender and sweet. The smell filling my apartment was incredible, warm and inviting and homey in exactly the way I'd hoped. I prepared all the vegetables for the salad with careful attention to presentation, julienning the carrots, blanching the broccoli until it was bright green and perfectly tender crisp, and roasting the beets until they were caramelized and sweet. I made the 3 different dressings from scratch, a classic vinaigrette with Dijon mustard and herbs, a creamy tahini dressing for those who wanted something richer, and a light lemon herb dressing that would complement the roasted vegetables perfectly. The stuffed mushrooms took longer than I'd anticipated, but they turned out beautifully, each one perfectly seasoned and topped with fresh herbs from the little garden I'd started on my balcony. I'd grown the herbs specifically for this dinner party, nurturing the plants for months so I could have fresh basil, thyme, and parsley for the meal. The pasta primavera came together easily, the vegetables bright and colorful against the gluten-free pasta I'd tested multiple times to make sure it had the right texture and wouldn't get mushy. By 3 in the afternoon, most of the food was prepared and staying warm or chilling as needed. I spent the next 2 hours setting up the apartment exactly as I'd envisioned it during all those weeks of planning. I moved furniture to create intimate conversation areas, set up the dining table with my new dishes and the cloth napkins I'd chosen so carefully. Each place setting was perfectly arranged, with the silverware positioned just as I'd learned from watching cooking shows and reading entertaining magazines. I arranged the flowers as centerpieces, lit candles throughout the apartment to create warm, welcoming lighting that would make everyone look beautiful and feel comfortable. I set up my carefully curated playlist to start at just the right volume, loud enough to fill any awkward silences but quiet enough that people could easily have conversations without having to raise their voices. I changed into my favorite dress, the blue one that made me feel confident and pretty. It was this wrap-style dress in a deep navy blue that brought out my eyes and made me feel like the kind of person who could successfully host an elegant dinner party. I did my hair and makeup with more care than usual, wanting to look like someone who belonged in the beautiful, welcoming space I'd created. I wanted to look like the kind of friend these people would be excited to introduce to their other friends. By 5 o'clock, everything was absolutely perfect. The apartment looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine, warm and inviting with beautiful lighting and the most incredible smells wafting from the kitchen. I'd checked and double-checked every detail. The wine was chilling at the perfect temperature, the appetizers were ready to be served at exactly the right moment, the main dishes were keeping warm without overcooking, and the dessert was waiting in the refrigerator, looking like something from a fancy restaurant. I checked my phone one more time, expecting maybe a few, on my way, texts or people asking if they could bring anything last minute or requesting parking directions. The kind of excited messages you get before a party when people are looking forward to the evening ahead and want to make sure everything goes smoothly. Instead, I found a text from Dylan that made my stomach drop like I was falling off a cliff. "Hey Charlotte, I'm so sorry but I'm not going to be able to make it tonight. Something came up with my family that I need to deal with immediately. I feel terrible about the timing and I know how much work you've put into this. Rain check." I stared at the message for a long moment, reading it over and over, trying to process what I was seeing. Family emergency, I told myself, trying to be understanding. These things happen. People have unexpected obligations and crises that take priority over social events. I was disappointed, definitely, but 10 people would still be plenty for a great evening. The conversation would still flow, the food would still be enjoyed and appreciated, the evening would still be the success I'd been dreaming of. "No problem at all, Dylan," I texted back, trying to sound understanding and gracious even though my hands were starting to shake slightly. "I hope everything's okay with your family. We'll definitely do this another time. Take care of yourself and let me know if you need anything." I tried to shake off the disappointment and focus on getting ready for everyone else. I told myself that Dylan's absence might actually make the evening easier in some ways, 10 people was a more manageable number for conversation, and there would be more food for everyone else to enjoy. Maybe it would be more intimate and cozy with a slightly smaller group. But 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed again with a message that made my heart sink even further into my stomach. This time it was Mia. "Charlotte, I'm really sorry, but Tyler woke up this morning not feeling well and it's gotten significantly worse throughout the day. He's running a fever and I don't want to leave him alone when he's this sick, and I definitely don't want to risk getting anyone else sick if it's contagious. Would it be okay if we skip tonight? I feel absolutely terrible about this short notice, especially knowing how much work you've put into this." The familiar knot of anxiety started forming in my chest, that tight feeling I got whenever social situations started going wrong, and I could feel my carefully laid plans beginning to unravel. 2 cancellations within 20 minutes of each other. But that still left 9 people, which was still a good crowd for a dinner party, right? Still enough for a successful evening with good conversation and laughter and the sense of connection I'd been craving. "Of course, Mia, that's completely understandable," I replied, even though my hands were shaking more noticeably as I typed. "Tell Tyler I hope he feels better soon. Health definitely comes first, and I wouldn't want anyone else to get sick either. Thanks for being responsible about it." But the texts kept coming, each one feeling like a small punch to the gut that left me more breathless than the last. At 5:30, it was Ashley. "Hey girl, got completely swamped at work today and had to stay late to finish this huge project that's due first thing Monday morning. My boss is breathing down my neck and I'm absolutely exhausted. I wouldn't be good company tonight and I'd probably fall asleep in my soup. Going to have to pass. I'm so sorry about the incredibly last-minute notice." Then Olivia 5 minutes later, "Charlotte, my family dinner ran way longer than expected and I'm still here helping my mom with some family drama that came up unexpectedly. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it to your place in time, and I don't want to show up super late and disrupt everything when you've planned such a lovely evening. Thanks for understanding, you're such a sweet friend for being flexible." Each message felt worse than the last. I kept telling myself it was just extraordinarily bad luck, that these things genuinely do happen, that the remaining people would still make for a lovely, intimate evening. But deep down, a horrible realization was starting to creep in like cold water seeping through cracks. The timing was too convenient, too perfectly coordinated. 4 people, all canceling within the span of an hour, all with different but equally urgent-sounding excuses that prevented them from attending. By 6 o'clock, the official start time, I'd put on all the carefully crafted invitations. I'd received cancellation messages from 8 of the 11 people I'd invited. Dylan with his sudden family emergency, Mia and Tyler with Tyler's mysterious illness, Ashley with work obligations that had apparently materialized out of nowhere, Olivia with family dinner complications, Hunter with a roommate who had suddenly become seriously ill and needed constant care, Zoe and Ryan with car trouble that would supposedly take hours to resolve and left them stranded across town. Each excuse was perfectly reasonable when considered individually. Each one was exactly the kind of thing that genuinely does happen in real life and genuinely does require canceling social plans. But all together, all arriving within the same narrow window of time, all from people who had been enthusiastic and excited about coming just days before? It felt less like an incredible string of coincidences and more like a coordinated effort to avoid spending their Saturday evening with me. I sat on my couch, staring at my phone, waiting for Nathan, Brooke, and whoever else might still be planning to arrive. Surely they would still come. Surely I hadn't completely misjudged every single relationship I thought I'd built over the past year. These were people I talked to regularly, people I'd shared meals with, people who had seemed genuinely excited about tonight and had given me every reason to believe our friendships were real and meaningful. 6:15 came and went. No knocks on the door. No texts from the remaining 3 saying they were running late or asking for parking directions or apologizing for traffic delays. Just silence and the sound of my carefully curated playlist continuing to play to an empty room, creating the perfect ambience for a party that was never going to happen. At 6:30, Brooke finally texted, and her message was somehow the most painful of all because of its casual dismissiveness. "Charlotte, I'm so sorry, I totally forgot I had plans with my sister tonight. We're supposed to go see this movie that's only playing for one more night at the indie theater. Can we reschedule your thing? I feel awful about this mix-up. Forgot." She had completely forgotten. After 3 weeks of having this marked on her calendar, after I'd sent a personalized, handwritten invitation and multiple reminder texts, after she'd told me how excited she was to meet my other friends and see my apartment, she had simply forgotten that I existed. This wasn't a family emergency or sudden illness or work crisis. This was just forgetting that my dinner party mattered, that she had made a commitment to me, that I had spent weeks planning an evening specifically designed to include her. Nathan's text came at 6:45, and it was almost insultingly brief. "Hey neighbor, running really behind on some stuff today. Won't be able to make it after all. Thanks for the invite though." No explanation of what stuff was more important than the dinner party he'd seemed genuinely excited about just days before. No acknowledgement of how last minute this cancellation was or how much preparation had gone into the evening. Just a casual dismissal of weeks of planning and preparation, as if my invitation had been nothing more than a casual suggestion rather than a carefully planned event. And then, at 7 o'clock, the final blow came from Hunter, the one person I'd thought would definitely show up because he'd even offered to bring his camera to document the evening. "Charlotte, something came up last minute that I absolutely have to deal with tonight. So sorry I can't make it. Maybe next time? Hope you have a great evening anyway. Something came up." No details, no explanation, no acknowledgement that this was the 11th cancellation in a row or that I might be sitting alone in my apartment surrounded by food for 11 people. Just another vague excuse from another person who had apparently found something better to do than spend Saturday evening with me. I set my phone down on the coffee table and looked around my apartment with new eyes, seeing it now not as the warm, welcoming space I'd created but as evidence of my own foolishness and desperation. The candles were flickering exactly as I'd planned, casting beautiful shadows on the walls. The playlist I'd carefully curated was playing to an absolutely empty room. The beautiful table I'd set for 11 people stood there like a monument to my own social failure, with its autumn-colored plates and cloth napkins and fresh flowers, all waiting for guests who were never coming and had probably never intended to come. In the kitchen, all that food I'd spent days preparing with such love and care was waiting to be enjoyed by people who weren't coming and apparently had never planned to come. The butternut squash soup was staying warm in the slow cooker, filling the apartment with its rich, comforting aroma that now seemed to mock my loneliness. The bread I'd baked from scratch was cooling on the counter, golden brown and perfectly textured, representing hours of failed attempts and careful refinement for an audience that didn't exist. The elaborate salad was crisp and colorful in its large serving bowl, every vegetable prepared with precision and care. The stuffed mushrooms looked like something from an upscale restaurant, each one perfectly arranged on its platter with fresh herbs I'd grown myself. The chocolate tart I'd been so proud of was sitting in the refrigerator, untouched and perfect, the culmination of multiple failed attempts and careful technique refinement. I walked into the kitchen and stood there, surrounded by enough food to feed 11 people, and I started to cry. Not just tears of disappointment, but deep, body-shaking sobs that came from somewhere I didn't even know existed inside me, a place of profound loneliness and rejection that I'd been trying to ignore for years. This wasn't just about tonight. This was about every time I'd tried to create connection and been left standing alone. This was about every birthday party where I'd waited by the window for friends who never showed up. This was about every group project where I'd ended up doing all the work while others took credit. This was about every invitation I'd extended that had been politely declined or simply forgotten entirely. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened to me, and the terrible familiarity of the feeling made it so much worse. The déjà vu was crushing, reminding me that this was apparently just who I was, the person who tried too hard, cared too much, and was ultimately forgettable when better options presented themselves. When I was in college, I threw a birthday party junior year and spent weeks planning it with the same obsessive attention to detail that had consumed me for this dinner party. I created a guest list of 20 people from my classes and dormitory, people I thought were my friends. I made a 3-layer cake from scratch, spending an entire weekend perfecting the recipe and decorating it with intricate buttercream flowers. I decorated my tiny dorm room with streamers and balloons, bought snacks and drinks with money I couldn't really afford to spend from my part-time job at the campus bookstore. I sent out handwritten invitations 2 weeks in advance, just like I had done tonight. 2 people showed up. 2. My roommate Sarah, who kind of had to be there since she lived in the same 12 by 10 foot space, and 1 girl named Jessica from my chemistry class who stayed for exactly 30 minutes before claiming she had to study for an exam that I knew wasn't until the following week. I spent my 21st birthday eating cake alone while my roommate awkwardly tried to make conversation, both of us pretending that this wasn't the most humiliating thing that had ever happened to me. In my first apartment after graduation, I organized a housewarming party, thinking it would be a great way to christen my new space and celebrate this milestone with the friends I'd made during my first few months in Austin. I spent an entire weekend cleaning and decorating, buying food and drinks, creating a playlist that I was sure would get everyone dancing. I sent out invitations to everyone I knew in the city, coworkers, neighbors, people from my yoga class, anyone who had shown me even the slightest bit of friendliness. 3 people came, and they clearly didn't want to be there. They stood awkwardly in my living room, holding their drinks and making the kind of polite conversation that makes it obvious everyone would rather be anywhere else. They stayed for exactly as long as social obligation required, about an hour, and left as soon as it was politely possible, claiming they had early mornings or other plans they needed to get to. But this felt different. This felt so much worse. Because I thought I'd learned from those experiences. I thought I'd finally figured out how to build genuine friendships, how to read social cues correctly, how to be the kind of person people actually wanted to spend time with. I thought the connections I'd made over the past year were real and meaningful and reciprocal, based on genuine compatibility rather than just geographical convenience or social politeness. Standing in that kitchen, surrounded by all that lovingly prepared food, I started questioning everything about myself and my approach to relationships. What was fundamentally wrong with me? Was I too eager, too needy, too intense in my desire for connection? Did I come on too strong when I tried to deepen friendships beyond surface-level acquaintanceship? Was I boring? Was my personality somehow off-putting in ways I couldn't recognize? Did people just tolerate me rather than actually enjoy my company? Was there something fundamentally unlikable about me that I couldn't see but that was obvious to everyone else? I thought about all those conversations I'd had with each of these people over the past months, conversations that had felt meaningful and genuine to me. The times Dylan and I had talked for over an hour after book club ended, diving deep into discussions about literature and philosophy and our personal experiences with both. I remembered how engaged he seemed, how he would ask follow-up questions and share his own thoughts and experiences. Had I been monopolizing those conversations? Had he been trapped by politeness, unable to escape my enthusiasm? I remembered the afternoon Mia and I spent walking around the farmer's market, laughing about dating disasters and sharing stories about our families and childhood memories. She had seemed so interested in my stories, asking questions about my hometown and my family dynamics. We had discovered we both grew up in small Midwestern towns, both had complicated relationships with our mothers, both had moved to Austin to reinvent ourselves. Had she just been being polite? Had our connection been entirely one-sided? I thought about the hiking trips where Ashley, Olivia, Hunter, and I had fallen into what felt like easy conversation about our dreams and fears and career goals. We'd talked about our struggles with dating, our hopes for the future, our past relationships and the lessons we'd learned. They had shared personal details about their lives, asked me questions about mine, included me in inside jokes and group planning. Had all of that been fake? Had they been including me out of pity rather than genuine interest? Had I misread everything? Had I projected friendship onto interactions that were just politeness? Were these people just being nice to the lonely new girl who was trying too hard to fit in? Had they been humoring me this whole time, participating in conversations and activities with me out of pity rather than genuine interest or enjoyment? The thought made me feel sick to my stomach. I sat down at my kitchen table, the one I'd set so carefully with my best dishes and cloth napkins and fresh flowers, and I let myself really absorb what had happened. 11 people had confirmed they would be here. 11 people had made what I thought was a commitment to me, had let me plan and prepare and get excited about spending time with them. And 11 people had found something more important to do at the last minute. I started thinking about the past few weeks leading up to tonight, searching for signs I might have missed or ignored. Had there been clues that people weren't as excited about this party as they claimed to be? Conversations that felt different, people seeming less enthusiastic when I brought up the party in casual conversation? Maybe it was the way Hunter had seemed slightly distracted when I'd mentioned the party during our last hike, nodding and saying, "Yeah, sounds great," without the enthusiasm he'd shown in his initial response. Or how Zoe had taken a while to respond to my reminder text, when she usually replied to messages almost immediately. Or the fact that Nathan had seemed surprised when I initially invited him, like he couldn't quite believe I was including him in something this personal. But then I remembered the positive responses, the enthusiasm people had expressed, the detailed messages thanking me for including them. This sounds amazing. Can't wait. It's going to be such a fun evening. Either they were all incredible actors, capable of faking genuine excitement in written form, or something had changed dramatically between then and now. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the cancellation messages again, looking for patterns or clues I might have missed the first time. The timing was what struck me most forcefully. They hadn't trickled in over several days as people gradually realized they couldn't make it. They hadn't even come in the morning or early afternoon, giving me reasonable notice. They had all arrived within the span of 2 hours, right before the party was supposed to start, in a concentrated barrage of last-minute cancellations. That felt deliberately cruel. Like maybe they'd all been planning not to come but hadn't wanted to deal with disappointing me until the last possible moment. Or worse, like they'd been talking to each other about it, deciding as a group that they didn't want to spend their Saturday evening at my dinner party, coordinating their excuses to make sure they all had plausible deniability. The thought made me feel nauseous. Had they been in a group chat somewhere, discussing my invitation? Are you going to Charlotte's thing? I don't really want to. Me neither, but I already said yes. Should we all just cancel? What excuse should we use? The idea that my friends, people I thought were my friends, might have been conspiring to avoid me was almost too painful to contemplate. I couldn't stop the thoughts from spiraling into increasingly dark territory. Maybe they thought I was weird for putting so much effort into the party, for caring so much about bringing everyone together. Maybe they thought I was being dramatic or needy, trying too hard to create something that should have happened naturally if we were really friends. Maybe they saw the detailed invitations and the carefully planned menu and the personalized reminder texts and thought I was being desperate or pathetic. Or maybe it was simpler and somehow worse than that. Maybe when they had other options for how to spend their time, spending it with me just wasn't appealing enough. Maybe I was fine as a hiking buddy or book club acquaintance or work friend, but not someone worth giving up their Saturday evening for. Maybe I was background noise in their lives, pleasant enough to tolerate in small doses but not interesting enough to prioritize. I got up from the table and started putting food into containers, mechanically moving through the motions of cleaning up a party that had never happened. The soup went into several large Tupperware containers. I'd made enough for 11 people, so there was an enormous amount left over. The bread got wrapped carefully in aluminum foil, though I knew I'd never be able to eat all of it before it went stale. The elaborate salad, the pasta, the stuffed mushrooms, all carefully portioned and stored away in my refrigerator that was now completely full of food that would serve as a daily reminder of this humiliation for the next week. As I worked, I found myself thinking about all the times over the past year when I'd made efforts to connect with these people individually, all the energy I'd invested in what I thought were developing friendships. The coffee dates with Brooke where I'd really opened up about my struggles with making friends in a new city, sharing vulnerabilities I rarely discussed with anyone. The long conversations with Dylan about books and life philosophy, staying after book club meetings until the library was closing around us. The hiking trips where I'd felt like I was finally part of a group, finally experiencing the kind of easy camaraderie I'd seen other people enjoy but had never experienced myself. Had I been the only one who felt that connection? Had I been projecting meaning onto polite social interactions, reading friendship into what was just people being nice? Had I been so desperate for connection that I'd convinced myself that casual acquaintanceships were deep friendships? I thought about my childhood, about the pattern that seemed to follow me everywhere I went, and wondered if this was just who I was destined to be. I'd always been the kid who tried too hard, who cared too much about having friends, who planned elaborate birthday parties that people found reasons not to attend. In elementary school, I was the one who organized playground games that somehow turned into other kids playing without me. In high school, I was the one who suggested group study sessions that turned into me studying alone while everyone else made plans I wasn't included in. In college, I was the one who organized group trips and outings that somehow became other people's trips that I wasn't invited to join. My mom used to tell me that I just needed to find my people, that there were friends out there who would appreciate my enthusiasm and loyalty and genuine desire for connection. "You're a wonderful friend, Charlotte," she'd say when I'd come home crying after another social disappointment. "Some people just don't know how to appreciate that yet. You'll find your tribe eventually, sweetie. You just have to keep putting yourself out there." But sitting in that kitchen tonight, surrounded by the evidence of my own social failure, I started wondering if my mom had been wrong. Maybe the problem wasn't that I hadn't found my people yet. Maybe the problem was me. Maybe I was fundamentally flawed in some way that made people uncomfortable, that made them want to avoid spending extended periods of time with me. I thought about the way I approached friendships, always eager to go deeper, to move from acquaintance to real connection as quickly as possible. Maybe that made people uncomfortable. Maybe I came across as intense or clingy or desperate. Maybe people could sense my hunger for belonging and it pushed them away rather than drawing them closer. The worst part was how familiar this feeling was, how it connected to every other time I'd experienced social rejection. The shame, the self-doubt, the way my chest felt hollow and tight at the same time. I'd felt this exact combination of emotions so many times before, and I'd promised myself after the last major disappointment that I wouldn't put myself in this position again. I'd sworn I would be more careful, more guarded, more realistic about what people were offering me. But here I was, having made the same mistake again. I'd believed that people actually wanted to spend time with me. I'd invested time and energy and hope and money into relationships that apparently meant more to me than they did to anyone else. I'd allowed myself to get excited about the possibility of connection, to imagine myself as someone who could successfully bring people together, someone who belonged in a group. I finished putting away the food and started blowing out the candles I'd lit around the apartment. Each one going out felt symbolic, like I was extinguishing the hope I'd had for the evening, for these friendships, for my social life in general. The apartment that had looked so warm and welcoming just hours before now felt like a stage set for a play that would never be performed, a beautiful but hollow space that highlighted my loneliness rather than disguising it. The silence in the apartment was overwhelming. I'd gotten so used to imagining it filled with conversation and laughter and the comfortable sounds of people enjoying each other's company that the actual quiet felt oppressive and strange. I could hear my upstairs neighbor's television playing some kind of action movie, the couple next door having what sounded like a heated but quiet argument, cars passing by on the street outside. All the sounds of other people living their lives, going about their Saturday evening plans, while I sat alone in my perfectly prepared, completely empty space. I sat back down at the kitchen table and looked at my phone again, part of me wanting to send response messages to everyone who'd canceled, letting them know how much their absence had hurt me. I wanted to tell them about the hours I'd spent planning, the care I'd put into accommodating everyone's dietary preferences and personality quirks, the excitement I'd felt about bringing them all together. I wanted them to understand what this evening had meant to me, how much I'd been looking forward to it, how devastating it was to sit alone surrounded by food I'd prepared with such love and anticipation. But what would be the point? If they'd wanted to be here, they would have been here. If they'd cared about disappointing me, they wouldn't have all canceled at the last minute with obviously coordinated timing. Telling them how hurt I was would just make me look pathetic and needy, confirming whatever assessment of me had made them decide I wasn't worth their Saturday evening. Instead, I started typing individual responses to each cancellation, trying to sound understanding and gracious despite the fact that I was crying as I wrote them. No problem, Dylan. Hope everything works out with your family. Tell Tyler I hope he feels better, Mia. Thanks for letting me know, Ashley. Each message felt like swallowing a small stone, but what else could I do? Get angry? Demand explanations? Call them out for what was obviously a coordinated effort to avoid my party? That would just confirm that I was exactly the kind of person they were right to avoid. As I sent the last message, I realized something that made everything feel even worse. These people would probably forget about tonight relatively quickly. It would be a minor blip in their lives, a dinner party they'd skipped for other plans, barely worth remembering by Monday morning. But for me, this would be another major data point in a long pattern of social rejection, another piece of evidence that I was fundamentally unlikable, another memory that would replay in my mind every time I considered putting myself out there socially. They'd go on with their lives, hang out with their real friends, attend parties thrown by people they actually wanted to spend time with. And I'd be left analyzing every interaction we'd had, wondering what I'd done wrong, what I could have done differently, how I'd so completely misjudged the nature of our relationships. I looked around my apartment one more time, taking in the table still set for 11 people, the living room arranged for conversation that would never happen, the kitchen full of carefully prepared food that would now serve as a daily reminder of my social failure. Tomorrow I'd have to put everything back to normal, pack away the extra chairs I'd borrowed, eat leftover soup for a week, pretend this evening had never happened. But tonight, I just sat there in the overwhelming quiet, letting myself feel the full weight of what had happened and what it meant about my place in other people's lives. 11 people had promised to be here, and 11 people had found something better to do. I was completely, utterly alone. The tears came again, harder this time, and I didn't try to stop them. I cried for the evening I'd lost, for the friendships I'd apparently imagined, for the version of myself who'd been so hopeful just hours ago. I cried for all the times this had happened before and all the times it would probably happen again. Because the truth was, I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know what I was doing wrong or how to be the kind of person people actually wanted to spend time with. I just knew I was tired of trying so hard and being disappointed, tired of putting myself out there only to end up sitting alone, surrounded by evidence of my own social failure. The kitchen full of food sat in front of me like a monument to everything I'd gotten wrong about friendship, about belonging, about my place in other people's lives. And all I could do was sit there and wonder if I'd ever figure out how to do any of it right, or if this was just who I was destined to be, the person who cared too much, tried too hard, and was ultimately, inevitably, left behind. Maybe some people are just meant to be alone. Maybe this is my reality, and I need to stop fighting it. Maybe I need to stop believing that someday, somewhere, I'll find people who actually want me around. Tonight proved that no matter how hard I try, no matter how much I care, I'll always be the one sitting in an empty room, waiting for friends who never really existed in the first place.